English learners must attend to both language and content development at the same time, as you know, and new college and career-ready standards have integrated content and language in ways that old standards never did. And so this has been a challenge for us as educators to really synthesize language and content. And the thing, though, is that content teachers may not have sufficient knowledge of how language develops in their English learners, and at the same time, English as a second language teachers, ESOL teachers, may not have enough content knowledge to engage students in content demands. So we're being asked to blend these in ways that have traditionally not been done in classrooms if you've not been in a content-based English as a second language program. So here's a couple of definitions. Folks have been working in the area of learning progressions for some years now in mathematics and science. Some of you may be already using progressions in other content areas. So here's a couple of quotes. This work really got started in places like Australia and New Zealand. And so Masters and Forsters working, 21 years ago now, they came up with this definition of learning progression. So they talk about them as vertical maps that provide a description of skills, understanding, and knowledge in a sequence in which they typically develop. And that's important because not every child necessarily goes through every stage of a progression. And they give a picture to teachers of what it means to improve in an area of learning. So that was a very early definition of what we mean by learning progressions. Kokor and Moshe and Rogat, working in the area of both math and science actually, they came up with another very useful definition that learning progressions are hypothesized descriptions of successively more sophisticated ways of student thinking. And so this kind of maps out a domain over a period of time. And so we adopted that notion of learning progression to come up with the language learning progressions. And Sandy, this is your slide. This is a really helpful slide to sort of distinguish what we mean by learning progressions and standards. So learning progressions describe sort of the incremental building blocks of a standard and sort of how children go between standards. Whereas a standard is usually over a larger period of time of what you want a child to achieve, perhaps by the end of a particular grade after a whole year's worth of learning. Learning progressions are, if they're done well, I would argue, are based on research. So these would be based on real student language samples. But standards are often a synthesis of expert opinion about where children should be in a particular area of learning. Learning progressions are developmental in the sense that we do think the incremental steps unfold over time. Standards may be, but they may not be. And then finally, it may be just a scope and sequence, let's say, for a standard. And then learning progressions are informing what we call short cycle teaching and learning. So basically, what are you going to do to the next step? It could just be the next lesson. It could be a small section of a unit, whereas standards are obviously taking a longer period of time to roll out in the classroom.